Welcome to the Living Well Church podcast, and thanks for tuning in today. Our mission as a church is to help people find faith in Jesus and a life of purpose and hope. You're about to watch a message that will challenge you, inspire you, encourage you, and most of all, point you to Jesus and the life of purpose and hope He has planned for you. So lean in and enjoy, and let God speak into your life.
Morning. As Jay said quite a lot of time, we're looking at transformation, series of transformation, and we've gone into a time where we are now looking at specific things. So Joe's talking about money, how we can transform money. Katie's looked at relationships, how God transforms our relationships, and I this morning am looking at work. So how God can transform us to transform our workplaces, or how God can transform how we work. To do this, I'm going to look at a chap called Solomon. And Solomon's one of my favourite guys in the Bible because he's also known as Jedediah, which if you shorten it is Jedi. So therefore, which I assume that's where Star Wars got it from, but he's automatically a cool guy in my books. He was an exceptionally wealthy king in the Old Testament, and he lived from about 970 BC to 931 BC. He's known for his wisdom. He asked the Lord for the gift of wisdom, and he received the gift of wisdom. And he worked hard. This guy knew what hard work was. You know, in his time, he built the first temple in Jerusalem. He wrote various books in the Bible, including things like Ecclesiastes. He took the throne at 15 years old. And so since then as well, he was invested in the rebuilding and the renovation, so to speak, of Israel. So he put a port in a various town. He constructed a whole city in the wilderness to make trade easier. And he rebuilt various cities with the remains that we can still see today. So therefore, the commercial prosperity of Israel went up because of the hard work he sowed into the land. So he knows a thing or two about what hard work looks like. And he wrote these words, though. In Ecclesiastes, in chapter 2, verse 17, he uses the voice of a teacher is speaking in Ecclesiastes, which was very kind of typical in literature of that time, to kind of speak through the mouth of a teacher, to look at kind of ethical or philosophical questions. And he says this: "So I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless. It's a chasing after the wind. I hated all things that I toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to one who comes after me, and who knows whether that person will be foolish or wise." And he talks furthermore about how loathsome it is just to work, to then leave this life and to leave that work to somebody else. And maybe there's some of you sat here this morning that could actually really see themselves in these verses. Maybe you're sat there going yeah, life sucks because I've just got to work. You know, and it's that working, Dolly Parton, to quote her, 9 till 5, isn't it? We get up, we get dressed, we do whatever crazy morning routines that we have, we go to work. And then the next day, it's kind of like on repeat. Everything has to go like clockwork in order for you to get to work on time. This week, I've gone back to, after my maternity, I started work back this week. And it's like the kids' clothes are lined up in order of what they're going to wear each day. Their lunch boxes are made. You know, everything is so fiercely organised so I can get to work by 7:45 a.m., dropping 2 children off in different places. You know, that's what it has to be. And sometimes you feel like you're in Groundhog Day. Sometimes you think, what am I toiling for? You know, this is Solomon, the wisest guy that we can read about. A hugely wealthy guy, and he's saying these words: "So I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun is meaningless." So therefore, the Lord has to put meaning into our lives in order for it to be beneficial, in order for it to speak, in order for it to do something which is beneficial in this life. And Solomon actually answers his own question. He writes Psalm 127, and if you've got your Bibles turn to it with me. Psalm 127, I'm literally going to look at the first few lines. But Solomon, in his wisdom, speaks about how the Lord can transform our work life so that it's not just a chasing of the wind, so it's not just a get up, it's not just a Groundhog Day, it's not just like working for no exact point. It's actually really purposeful labour which builds his kingdom and which speaks of the Lord. So in 1:27 he says, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labour in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you'll rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he who grants sleep to those he loves. So here, I'm just going to quickly give you a little bit of a glimmer of that word house in the first line. That word house can literally mean house, but also it shares the same root word, banner, with family, with son and daughter. So also that word house could mean household. So if you don't work here for whatever reason, I'm sure you still do housework. Yeah, the ironing, the washing up, putting the dishwasher on, the hoovering, all that stuff that we love. Yeah, all of that I'm sure you still do. So everybody here, if I'm not talking about work kind of going to somewhere, I'm also encompassing that the life of being, of doing housework. So the first thing he says is, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labour in vain. Unless the Lord builds the house. That's a home truth for us. That unless the Lord is involved in our work is pointless. Our very foundation, our very reason for having to go to work must be because of the Lord. We can look at businesses that people have poured their lives into. We can name Woolworths, Northern Rock, Tammy Girl. Where did that go? Yeah, but where are they now? People would have given up hours and hours and hours. People would have given up maybe their whole lives to these businesses. And yet, what's their legacy and where are they? Because actually, unless the Lord is in it, unless he is our reason, then it's not worth anything. So just think about your work for a minute. Are you building something that leaves a God-infused legacy? Are you working to leave something of God in your workplace? And I'm not just saying that you've got to leave your job and work somewhere which is Christian. I'm not saying that at all. Because Paul in the Bible had to build tents. David had to tend to his sheep. I'm saying, how can God transform your perspective towards your work so that actually you see your work as your mission field? Or is your reason for working to go and make money? Is your reason for working to pay the bills? Is your reason for working to meet your targets? Is your reason for working is because people expect you to? Is your reason for working because it gives you position or status? Or actually, is your reason for working because God said, I want you in that place to do a mission work for me? Has God placed you there so that he can be glorified in that workplace through what you're going to do? So therefore, I've got a little bag of tricks with me this morning. What's in the bag? This is the bomber. What's this? Bit of Lego, okay? My son loves a bit of Lego. If the Lord isn't the reason, if he isn't the bottom line foundation while we're working, then actually what we're building is going to fall flat. Most of us know that parable in the Bible of the house built on sand or the house built on rock. And if I didn't have a good foundational base for my Lego house isn't going to be very strong. So I need my Lego base. And then you say, well, how do we know, or how can we think, or how can we put the Lord into our workplace? So just have a think back to your last week. Just think about the housework you've done. Think about the cleaning. Think about the ironing. Think about the meetings you've been in. Think about the times you've spoken to work colleagues. Think about the times you've driven to work. And just think, if you didn't know God, would anything have changed? If you didn't know God, would anything have changed? How you did the washing, would that have changed? in those meetings, what you said, would anything have changed? As you met with those colleagues and you said this, that, or the other, would anything have changed? Because, you know, in the Bible, it tells us a lot about what we should be like. In Colossians 3, verse 23, it says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as if working for the Lord. In Proverbs 13, it talks about being a diligent worker. In Philippians, it says you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. In 2 Timothy 2, it talks about being hardworking. In Titus, it says be an example. And in James, it talks about integrity. So do you know what? You know that the Lord is your foundation. You know that the Lord is the reason for your working. If you go to work and you show honour, if you're diligent, if you're hardworking, if you tell the truth, if you're a person of integrity, people will be able to know that your foundation is Christ. And so think about the week. Have you, in some instances, showed grace instead of judgment? Have you, in some instances, showed patience instead of being impulsive? And you, in some instances, showed humility instead of pride? In some instances, instead of being pessimistic and miserable, have you shown praise? You know, have you veered away from gossip? When you had a chance to speak badly about your boss, did you kind of shy away from that? When you had time to clock off a bit early, do you think, no, actually, I'll work till the last minute? You know, it's about knowing, saying to people and showing people, actually, the reason why we do this, the reason why I'm working is for Jesus Christ. Not from a pay packet, not from a boss, not to reach my targets, not be told, well done by them, but actually to be told at the end of the day, well done, good and faithful servant. And you know, I'll give some personal, this week I had a bit of a tricky incident at work. I had somebody, one of my line managers, who is a brilliant line manager, was having a difficult time with a colleague, with somebody in her team. You know, she felt that the person in her team was underperforming. She felt like the person in her team wasn't doing the right job. She felt like she was constantly picking up on that person in her team. And she came and we sat and we had a meeting. I said, do you know what I'm going to do? I want to tell you something that happens in the Bible. She was like, what? But I told her a parable in the Bible about a vine tree that it's not growing, and the person comes along, the farmer says to the owner, I want to just cut it down. And the owner says, well, hang on, let's put it somewhere where there's more sunlight. Let's give it every single reason to thrive, and then let's see if it grows. And then I said to her, well, what do you think that story means? And she said, actually, I think I need to change my tact with that colleague. I think I need to praise her instead of picking her up on everything. I think I need to trust her instead of showing her that I don't trust her. And you know what? I would never have thought of that. She would never have thought of that. But I have to say that in my workplace, my foundation has to be God. And I have to show that my foundation is God, so that other people can know him, can know that his ways are far above our ways. You know, we sang this morning, his ways are perfect. You know, I work in a Christian place, but at the same time, the majority of people who I work with are not Christians. And even so, when I've worked in non-Christian places, I have been known to say, hang on, I'm just going to pray about that. When I've had a challenging or difficult situation, I normally say, I need to pray about that first. Because I need to know what God's transformational method of dealing with that situation is before I jump in. Because I need to show that God is my absolute foundation. And so very simply, when we start doing little things like this, when we start saying, you know what, I need to pray about that. When we start showing that we're people of integrity, here's something I made earlier. We start building that house. We start allowing the Lord to build the house so that we as the builders do not labour in vain. And one little key I would say that helps that massively, just a practical little help, is that before work even starts, we just have to spend time with the Lord. Like, we have to. And you know, I know people go, oh, but I have to be at work by a time in the morning. You know, I have to get we have to get, Johnny does it as well, 2 kids and a dog. Johnny normally looks after the dog. He is the size easily of our 2 children. 2 kids ready, out the house, and we both go to work, 7:30? I'm not saying that to brag, I'm just saying that it can be done. You know, spending time with the Lord is one of the first things we do. It has to be done, because otherwise the rest of our day, there is no foundation, there is no building that the Lord does, and what we're doing is pointless. I don't want a pointless day. I don't want a pointless week. I don't want pointless year on year on year. I want all these hours that I'm pouring into work to be fruitful. So the next thing is you need to know what you are building. If you're going to allow the Lord to build the house, if you're a builder, you need to have some sort of idea about what you are building. So, I don't know if you know, but with Lego these days, you get all kinds of these little comic things which tell you exactly how to build, what you're building, so that you can make things that look fantastic. Let me try and find some. Look, here we go. Look at this. It's great. And so we have that. We have the Bible. We have the example of Jesus Christ. We don't want to be like our boss. We don't want to be a CEO of a company. We don't want to be a director. We don't want to be the best house worker, I'm sure, that there ever is in life. We want to be like Jesus. Don't we? Yeah, as Christians, we want to be like Jesus. That's our goal. That's our aim. And so actually instructions that we need are right in here. They're in the Bible. Hence why we have to spend that time reading it, knowing about Jesus. But also we have to spend time asking God, Lord, why have you put me in this workplace? What is this workplace to look like if you have transformed it? And you know what? Maybe the Lord just wants you to, he's put you there. God, my daughter is rivaling me this morning, isn't she? She's like, she can shout louder. Maybe it's that in the workplace there's just one person who you're meant to reveal God to. Maybe there's just one time that you are meant to be there to talk, to change something. You know, I remember when I was in a meeting at Dover Grammar School for Boys, and we were in one of the first meetings I was there as a management, and the head said, we need to talk about the school song. And you know what? The school song, the words were, let God's light shine through us. And I thought, there's no way this is going to go. And she said, I think we need to rewrite the school song because it's all about Jesus. And I went, I think we've got far bigger things to fry right now than the school song. I think we need to let that school song just be the school song. And do you know what? I actually shut that conversation down pretty quickly, and it's still the song today. And you know, it's a small thing, isn't it? It's such a small thing, but actually hundreds of boys that have sung those lyrics, let the Lord's light shine through us. Amen. You know, maybe you're just in the workplace just for one of those little moments, but you need to ask the Lord, why have you put me in this place? You know, there's a chap called Joseph in the Bible. Many of you you would have heard of him. The Lord first gave him a dream of what his life would one day look like. And it was a dream of leadership. It was a dream that he would have a position of power. And you know, many times in his life did not look like that. In fact, there were times where he was in prison. There was times where he was working in a servant. There was times where he was thrown into a pit. And yet the Lord kept building his house because Jesus was his foundation, and he kept trusting in the Lord's way. And therefore, he then fulfills that position one day. He trusted in the Lord, and he knew something of what the Lord had in store for him. And you need to ask the Lord, what have you got in store for me? And you know what? Maybe it is that the Lord wants you to change your entire company. And you might be thinking, that seems really unrealistic. But you know what? The Bible is full of the Lord transforming entire countries. Jesus came and transformed the entire world forever. So therefore, we mustn't limit what the Lord wants to do. And you might think, well, how do I ask God? How do I sit there and say, Lord, what do you want from me at work? It is as simple as that. Spend some time in quiet and just ask God, what do you want me to do at work? What's your vision? Spend some time just sitting there, just seeing if you can hear something from him. If it helps, put worship music on. If you haven't heard from the Lord before personally, then do you know what? Ask other people to also pray into that. Ask people who you know who hears from the Lord to pray into that. Ask people to pray for a word for you. And read the Bible. Because it might be whilst you're reading, something might just stand out to you. And you might not know why, but whilst thinking about it, whilst cogitating on it, things might be shown or revealed to you. So therefore, let God be the reason you're going to work. Let what you're building show the characteristics of Jesus. And then ask God, what is it meant to look like? And you know, this morning, I haven't finished building the house, as you can tell. Okay? Because do you know what? It isn't about the house. It isn't. It's not about getting a finished product at your workplace. It's not about fulfilling all your targets. What it is about is allowing others just to see that you are working for the Lord